Hi, everybody, and welcome. I am so thrilled to be introducing my dear friend, Kyle Wagner. Kyle is an innovation and project-based learning coach who empowers leaders to improve instructional practices and student learning through innovative programs. Kyle has also taught at High Tech High, the school featured in the hit documentary Most Likely to Succeed. And Kyle was the former Futures Academy coordinator at the International School of Beijing, which was an innovative model that used cross-curricular projects to equip students with 21st century learning skills. His book, which is a must-get, The Power of Simple, is being used by several schools, including many of the schools that I work with as well, who love him and have him come in, so you must bring him in, because he's incredible, that help schools leaders transform student learning. He currently now resides in San Diego, and he's available to come and work with you, and I highly recommend it. So I'm going to pass you off to Kyle and have him get going. Hi, Kyle.
All right, thank you, Tanya, for that very warm introduction. I'm going to get started pretty quick, but really a couple things. First, I want to give a shout out for Tanya. Her session is going to be coming on a little later, and I'll give you a plug at the end to explain where you can go to see her session. She's a really innovative educator. Does a lot of Google tools, so I'm going to introduce her later. Without further ado, I'm glad that you guys are here. Regardless of what your experience is with 21st century learning or 21st century skills or project-based learning, you're in the right place. I want to first, in terms of housekeeping, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions. Please, as I'm going along, if there's any questions that come up, I've reserved about 5 minutes at the end to answer all of those questions. But really, I want you guys to start by telling me in that question and answer box, if you could just tell me what school you're from, and maybe just if on a scale of 1 to 5, what your experience is with project-based learning. So 1 means I'm a novice, 5 means I feel like I'm an expert and really want to kind of push where I'm at right now with project-based learning. So if you could do that, that would be great. And as I'm going along with my presentation, I will keep that in mind. I apologize, I'm a bit of a fast talker, but hopefully you're gonna be able to saturate and get everything taken in. I'm gonna stop the broadcast of myself and go immediately into sharing my screen and showing you the presentation. So without further ado, here we go. And hopefully you're seeing these screens. I'm going to stop this just really quick because I think I was sharing the wrong screen. I'm going to come back here and try this again and make sure that we have the right presentation that is happening. Okay, I think we are on the right presentation. And here is our screens, hopefully that you are seeing. Okay, so I think this is correct. Okay, great. So again, I'm the founder and lead consultant for Transform Educational Consulting. I think Tanya mentioned a little bit about that, but I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, where we really work with schools and school leaders and helping them to transform learning experiences for students, really centered around project-based learning and assessing 21st century skills. Again, so we explain a little bit about who I am. And really, we're going to start with talking about what are the 21st century skills, because it's important that we define these skills before we move on to how we assess those. What is project-based learning? How do we blend the two? So sometimes you see project-based learning and 21st century skills aren't blended. We're going to learn how you can blend those two. You're going to learn about how to assess 21st century skills in a project-based environment, which is hopefully what you tuned into this session to actually do. And look at how do you direct students in helping them direct their own growth with student growth portfolios. So as they're going through the project and they're submitting assignments and submitting assessments, how do you really direct them towards broadcasting that to a live audience that is more than just themselves? And finally, closing, where can you learn more? If you want to learn more about how to assess 21st century skills in a project-based environment, I'm going to give you access to my email, where you can email me and find some more links for how to do that. So again, I'm a project-based learning coach. I'm the former Futures Academy coordinator at the International School of Beijing that uses cross-curricular project-based learning to connect students to their passions in the real world. I'm a former project-based leader at High Tech High, and I'm a humanities teacher. First and foremost, I am a teacher with over 10 years experience in innovative learning environments. So I hope I can share a little bit of my expertise. Let's jump right in this. What are the 21st century skills? Really, the 21st century skills in the informational age, as we know, these are many of the skills that are valuable in this age. And a lot of the skills that were useful in the industrial age aren't really useful anymore. They're becoming obsolete. In fact, 40% of the jobs students will receive when they graduate from high school, 40% of those are jobs that do not exist today. So these kind of skills are absolutely pivotal. Many people have written about these 21st century skills, and you can find these skills in Tony Wagner's book, and that's most likely to succeed. And you can also find these skills covered by various organizations. These include creative thinking, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, problem solving, and innovative thinking. You might have heard them referred to as the 4 C's. I've included a couple other of those skills that move outside of just those 4 C's that you can find. Okay, so these are those 21st century skills. Now, traditionally, when we look at schooling, you typically will have these skills are separated. Generally, we'll have in traditional schooling, you'll have the hard skills, the core academic content, which falls into each specific subject, like science, math, humanities, English, social studies. We usually teach and assess those, and then we leave the soft skills, what we call them, the 21st century skills, we leave those kind of outside of the core curriculum. Okay, but really, this presentation is going to challenge us to look at how do we take those hard skills that you get in the core academic content that we know are so important, and how do you get those soft skills, and how do you blend those two? And really, the best way to blend those two is through project-based learning. Okay, so we're going to talk about how do we blend those two, those hard skills and those soft skills, and how do we do that through project-based learning, which is a great strategy in which to blend those two. And it's important that we understand what is the definition of project-based learning. Well, project-based learning, and this is according to the Buck Institute that does a lot of training around project-based learning, it represents the intersection of these two sets of skills. And more importantly, the definition is a dynamic approach to learning where students acquire deeper knowledge through active exploration of real-world problems and challenges. Okay, and we're going to talk specifically about one project that was actually a real-world project that I and my other facilitators engaged our students around. And this is that project that you can see featured here. So we're going to kind of reverse engineer this. I hope you guys like backwards design. I think it really helps to lend understanding towards what I'm going to talk about through backwards design. So we're going to look at here. You can notice this is a project that we ran, and it was called Project Clean Water. This is a sample project. Now, in this particular project, and any projects that you run, it's very important that you have a concrete final task to this project. So for this particular project, Project Clean Water, our concrete task is what we were going to have students do is use quantitative and qualitative data to make a positive impact on a local waterway. Okay, and this is our local waterway where we lived outside of Beijing. As you can probably see, it was very polluted, and so our real world task is students, you're going to use data to make a positive impact on our local waterway. So to start, before you even start with the 21st century skills, it's important that you've defined a project. Okay, so this is our project, Project Clean Water, in which we'll talk through that project. Now, you want to identify what are the 21st century skills students will need to be successful. Okay, it's very important that you identify maybe 2 to 3 skills. I really would caution you to identify more than 3 skills because you want to identify what are those skills that we can teach and assess in this project. And in this particular project, we knew that if students were going to make a difference and communicate what their innovation was to improve a local waterway, like you see right here, they were going to need critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. Okay, so again, identify those 21st century skills that students will need to answer that driving question. And we're going to go through each of those assessments. So identify 3 of those skills. Now, with those particular skills, you want to create summative assessments to assess these skills. I can't really stress that enough. Identify 3 of those skills and look at the project. If kids are going to produce an impact that is going to really help make a positive influence on a local waterway, then there are going to be those 3 things: critical thinking, problem solving, and communication that they're going to need. And we are going to identify what are those tasks that they're going to need to complete to do that. Okay, so create those summative assessments. Here is a copy of our summative assessments. These 4 summative assessments are the ones that we identified where we were explicitly going to teach those 21st century skills. Students would analyze data and present that data. Students would then present the abstract of the problem in studying the actual local waterway. What really is this problem and how do we explain that? Creating a proposal. Students would create a proposal in which they would actually make a recommendation for what we should do, and they would pitch that to local government. And finally, they would present that proposal. So they're able to get feedback for that proposal and then present it. Now notice how each of those 21st century skills, you are giving them multiple opportunities to improve. Critical thinking, you see, appears here 4 times, problem solving 3 times, and communication twice. It's important that you give students multiple opportunities to actually show that they have those skills. Okay, so you've got your summative task, you've got now the skills identified. Now it's time to move in. Well, how do you structure those? Okay, if you don't, I love this quote, if you don't know where you are headed, you will probably end up someplace else. Now, if you don't do project-based learning, you might have heard project-based learning, you just let the kids, you set them free. And that's not true, okay? You actually help guide them, especially if they're the younger kids. So this is a way to let them know exactly where you're going. You're gonna tell the students what they're gonna do ahead of time. All right, so we told the students the first thing that you are going to do, first thing you're doing is you're going to analyze data. That is the first step, okay? You are going to take water samples from the local waterway and you're going to analyze that data. And this is a picture of the students analyzing that data. Now you got to be explicit with students. What are you expecting them to be able to do? Okay, this is them analyzing that data. The target skill was critical thinking, okay? And we would tell students critical thinking involves these 3 things. This is emerging, approaching, and target. We're hoping that you can get here with your critical thinking. Can you integrate sufficient information to address how we're going to use data to improve our local waterway? Now, you might notice here as well, this is actually tied to Common Core standards. So if you teach in the States, these are your Common Core standards. If you teach elsewhere, you can insert your own standards that align with this particular language. Now, emerging, approaching, target, you have a chance to read these. I'm not going to go too much into detail with those. We are actually hoping that students will reach the target. But with many students, which is totally understandable, they're probably not going to hit that at first. So let's say that the students have now analyzed the data. They explain that data in a paper. And this is where the student thinks that they fall. Okay? So notice how the student is evaluating themselves. They think that they're here. But you know, the teacher, you've come in and you said, you know what, Johnny, I think you're emerging. Okay, so you're giving that student an opportunity to say where they think they fall, and you've given the opportunity to say where you think they are. Okay, and notice how those are misaligned, which is okay. You'll have a conversation then with that student and explain to them why they're only emerging and not approaching. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, that's great. Students have identified where they fall in the rubric, but how do we keep track of this? How do we ensure that students are experiencing growth? And that is why, in addition to these rubrics and these self-evaluations that students are going to do, they're going to also reflect. Little Johnny's going to say, hey, I feel like I'm approaching, And here's why. I attempted to integrate the data that I had. I have this really good data to improve our local waterways. But you know what? I didn't really gather that many sources, and I probably could have talked to more experts or really consulted more of the data that was out there. And so little Johnny gets to explain in this audio reflection or a written reflection about how well they did. Now, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where do students post this, okay? Where do students post this particular work? All right, next, assessment number 2. So now you've moved on to the first assessment, you're going to the second assessment, you're going to allow students to build upon those critical thinking skills. The next step is for them to write an abstract of the problem. Now you're giving them the opportunity to really fully define the problem and the context of their data for that problem. This is a student here who is collaborating with one of his buddies. This is a student from a local Chinese school. So you notice that these projects have the incredible ability to actually help students reach outside of their own school. So we partnered with this particular school. This is a local Chinese student. They're working together to really understand this problem. All right, now let's look at the second assessment. In this second assessment, we were asking students to still use that critical thinking analysis, okay? Do they accept arguments? Okay. Do you have difficulty evaluating arguments, or do you evaluate arguments for answering the driving question? Okay. So you're trying to get them here to that target. This again is a critical thinking skill. We're also now giving students the opportunity to improve their critical thinking skills because this is a second assessment. And now we have added the caveat of problem solving. Students will have to use this rubric in determining how well they're able to solve problems. Do they justify the choice of criteria to evaluate the ideas that they have in solving this problem? Now again, this is very early in the project process, so we aren't expecting students to be here, but we are expecting students to improve upon the skills that they have and to develop those skills so that they do get here. And you as a good teacher are giving them that opportunity. So let's look at how little Johnny thought that he did. Okay, notice how little Johnny, he was here, okay, when it came to the analysis of the data, and you also thought they were there. And then again, with problem solving, notice how you gave them the same marks. Okay, that's great. Your evaluations are starting to align, and more importantly, you're allowing really Johnny to take the driver's seat in his learning and actually explain how he has gathered these skills in this content. Okay, so now we're going to move on and look at, okay, great, little Johnny's getting these skills. That's great. We're going to give him another opportunity. Because the most important thing is you want to give students the opportunity to show growth. This is the growth that you are hoping that students will receive through the process of the project. Okay, here's assessment number 3, project proposal. Now look at, here's little Johnny. I'm not going to give you his name. His name's not Johnny, but little Johnny is actually now able to present his proposal for how he's going to improve the local waterway in front of his class. This is a picture of our student sharing his information and sharing what he has learned with the entire class of Futures Academy so he can get feedback on his idea. So we have critical thinking. Okay, I'm not going to go over these because we've already assessed this, but we're going to give Johnny another opportunity. Problem solving. Johnny gets another opportunity to share what his particular idea is. And now we have added communication. Little Johnny is going to have to communicate like a good communicator how his particular proposal is going to help improve water quality. And we help Johnny by saying, look, Johnny, do you consistently use technology tools? Do you consider alternative solutions? Do you explain your ideas clearly and fluidly? Johnny first takes that rubric and says, you know what, Mr. Wagner, here's where I think I am. And so Johnny, notice how Johnny highlights in the yellow where he thinks he is. Now at this point you see this is blue because the rubric is kind of large. I couldn't fit it on the whole screen. But notice how critical thinking, both teacher and student agree. This is where Johnny's at. Problem solving, Johnny's approaching that standard, okay? But you know what, with communication, Johnny is a little bit all over the map. So notice how we can put where Johnny is at, and Johnny knows specifically, I need to use technology tools a little bit better. I don't really consider alternative solutions. I might have to consider those alternative solutions when I present my proposal, okay? So now we have 3 different skills that were assessed, and we're moving on to our 4th and final assessment. The 4th and final assessment is their exhibition of their work. Okay, this is a student who is sharing his particular idea. He noticed that there was a lot of pots that were in this local waterway. And so what he did is found a way to create biodegradable plant holders so that once those pots or plants did wash into the waterway, is that they were actually biodegradable and didn't harm the environment. Here's all the infographics that that student had to share with that. And now he's presenting to his peers and also presenting to a professional audience that includes local government officials. This particular girl developed her own nail polish. Instead of the nail polish that you get in stores, she did a dye-free, toxic-free nail polish so that she can do her nails and not have to worry about that toxic dye going into the local waterway. So notice how she's very proud, he's very proud. They were able to communicate what they've learned, and even more importantly, they're able to explicitly talk about those 21st century skills like critical thinking, problem solving, communication. Notice how they all are right here in target. Now, this is the best case scenario, folks. The best case scenario is now you have students and teachers evaluate, and guess what? Little Johnny, little Susie, little Sally, little Mark have gathered all the skills that they needed to succeed in this project. Notice how little Johnny has now got his critical thinking skills, his problem solving skills, and his communication skills. He's mastered those skills through a well-designed project that you have done for them. Okay, this is what you're hoping for them to get to. All right, now as promised, where does all this information get stored? We direct little Johnny and Sally to keep track of their learning. This is where they keep track of it. They keep track of it in a 21st century growth portfolio. Now we have used 2 different types of portfolios. Seesaw, you might be familiar with. I'm going to give a huge plug to Seesaw because Seesaw is incredibly easy to use. Students can post videos, pictures, they can do reflections. This is a really good portfolio for students to show growth. I'm also going to give a plug for WordPress. We have used WordPress with great success, and I'm going to show you how we have used both of those to help students keep track and document their learning. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 portfolios that show student growth. All right, the first portfolio I'm going to show you is one of our students here, okay, and I'm going to direct you to their blog. Now notice in this blog, they're able to keep track of all the things that they've learned. Now you see over here in the blog is they were able to categorize their different 21st century skills. Okay, so I'm going to look here and look in critical thinking and find out, hey, Hero, what did you do in relationship to critical thinking? I click here on critical thinking, and notice how I have all of those assignments that he's done in relation to critical thinking. He's going to include here and reflect upon those skills. All right, so this is an opportunity for you, and if you want to make it even a little bit more dynamic, you can make it even more dynamic and include videos. Students can include videos, they can include pictures of what they've learned. So here's another blog. They can include little slides and little slide decks built in, integrated with their actual blog themselves. Okay, but this is where you would have students keep track of their growth. Okay, now I'm going to go back over here to our student growth and move us on to the next slide. Here are the 5 most important takeaways. If you are watching this, I know I talked fast. I saw that I only had till 12:30, but this is going to be available live. If you don't take anything else away from this, this is what I hope you take away. You've got to be very explicit about the 21st century skills that you're teaching. Let students know exactly what you're expecting for each of those skills. Second, give students an opportunity to grow. 3, provide time for self-reflection. 4, don't assess more than 3 21st century skills. You might be tempted to say, kids, we're going to learn all these skills. That's great, but only assess the ones that you know that you can help students build through, that you can assess more than once. And finally, only report out on the most recent assessment data. It's not fair to little Johnny if you give him a grade for critical thinking on that first task that he did where he had to analyze his data. You've got to give them multiple opportunities and give them the mark that matches their most recent summative assessment data. Those are the big five. Where can you learn more? Here's where you can learn more. Hey, there's 3 places that you can learn more. First, follow me. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm pretty good about checking my Twitter, and I really like to get back to people. Give me a shout out of what school that you teach at, what information that you need. I try to keep this regularly updated. I give 1 week. I will give a newsletter every single week, which will give access to some resources that will help you out. So that's one place, okay? Second place, this is the book that I wrote. It's called The Power of Simple, okay? The Power of Simple is a book that really will help you as a teacher or as an administrator or as a school leader to really leverage on real simple strategies for student growth. Very simple strategies for student growth that you can utilize in your classroom tomorrow. Okay, the last one is, here's my email, kylewagner@transformschool.com. I'm going to slow down here because this is probably something that you really are going to value, okay? Do you want these actual rubrics? Because I will send you these rubrics. If you shoot me an email, kylewagner@transformschool.com, and say, hey, Kyle, enjoyed the presentation. I really want to learn more. Can you send me the actual rubrics? I'll send you those 21st century skills rubrics so you can start using these. You can adapt them with the language that you need for your projects and your tasks with students. And I'll send those to you right away through kylewagner@transformschool.com. So shoot me an email and I'll get those to you. All right. So without further ado, I apologize because we only got about 4 minutes left. If you have a question, can you ask that question? Please don't be shy. I see that everybody is including some information about where they're from. I see people tuning in from all over the place. People from Paraguay. There's people over here from China. Someone's tuning in from Iowa who does STEM, which is amazing if you do STEM. Or STREAM. I love this. Science, technology, religion, engineering, art, and math. This is great. You're probably already used to project-based learning. But any questions that you guys have, I have a couple minutes and I'd like to answer those questions. So if you can post those questions in that question box, then I'd be happy to answer those. I'm going to give one more plug. Tanya Avrith, who introduced me, she's going to do a workshop, and she's going to do a workshop on using some of these Google pedagogical tools to help you really improve student learning. Okay, so I really encourage you to go see her session. It's going to be at 12:30. All right, now I'm going to pop out of here, guys. So I'm going to stop presenting. And here's me. Hi, welcome. Hopefully I can answer some of your guys' questions that you have. If you want to put some of your questions, we got about 3 more minutes. So if you have any questions regarding project-based learning or 21st century skills, feel free to ask those questions. 3 minutes. So any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer. So I'm seeing here that people are, some people use Blogger, that's great. Some people are asking what kind of tools can we use. If you use Blogger, great. Whatever digital portfolio tool that you use, whatever blog tool you use, it's really more important that students have the opportunity to broadcast their work with a live audience and share and show their growth. Okay, I'm seeing, let's see, I'm seeing some others. Some people, oh, how do you contact government officials? Great questions. Thank you, Evelyn, for asking that question. To contact government officials, what we did is we really utilized our local school, and our school has a department called Local Government Contacts, and we use that department. If you're a school leader, I'd really encourage you to start a department at your school that's really responsible for reaching out to your local contacts. We had an experiential learning department, and that department was responsible for making the contacts. If you do that, you can have teachers direct the teachers to that department, and they can actually reach out to the government officials. Amanda is asking, yes, this presentation was for middle school. Okay, this was for 7th grade. So it was 6th through 8th grade. We did this for middle school. I have some people asking, what do you think is better, using Google Sites or Blogger? My personal preference is I kind of like using Blogger. If you use Google Classroom, I would suggest that you really go with the platform that you're already using in terms of the technology. So if you use Google Classroom or you use Google Tools, then yeah, use Google Sites. It depends on really what's most important for you. Shale is asking, why are critical thinking, problem solving, and communication considered 21st century skills? That's a great question. I think really mainly it has to do with their 21st century skills, because these are the skills that students need to thrive in an informational 21st century type of environment. That's why they're considered 21st century skills. Looking at other questions here, my content expertise in teaching. I have taught humanities, so I teach history and English. That's my content expertise. I've also taught robotics courses as well. And so mainly it is centered around humanities. That's my content expertise. Amber Ross asked, how can we better understand in-depth 21st century skills? If you shoot me an email, Amber, I will send you out a document. But really the book Most Likely to Succeed by Tony Wagner is a really good opportunity for you to find out what are those 21st century skills and how do we assess those skills. I'm looking at some more questions. Miss Matiska, you asked, do you grade a student based on the final presentation rubric or average all the results? That's a great question. In this case, the results, you want to give the grade that shows the most recent data that you have accumulated. Okay, so grade based on the most recent data. So we would actually grade yes on that final presentation, because that has given the students the opportunity to show their growth. So that's what we would grade based off of. Sabir asked, is this good for junior learners? It says, hey, I think it's good for adult learners, but is it good for junior learners? The answer is yes. This works for all students. Now, if you have elementary school students, you are going to have to guide them a lot more as a teacher. So make sure that you are providing those frameworks and that guidance and really explicitly kind of holding their hand through it. Okay. Let's see, other questions. Do I use ISTA standards as a guideline for digital skills? This is a question from Mary Howard. Thank you, Mary, for that question. The ISTA standards for technology, you can implement those standards. We don't use those particular standards for the digital skills, but we do use standards that have been identified by the Buck Institute in addition to our program, in addition, actually, to the IB standards. We use those as well. So it's up to you. If you have used the ISTA standards, then incorporate those ISTA standards into your actual rubric. How long does a project take place? Angeles, the project usually takes place for about 6 weeks, okay? If you make a project that's longer than 6 weeks, chances are students are going to lose interest, okay? This particular project lasted about 7 to 8 weeks, which is okay. I'd say 8 weeks is pushing it. Don't go past 8 weeks. 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks. So if you have 4 weeks to 8 weeks, that's a good window for you. Questions. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to all your guys' questions. I know you have other sessions to go to, and I really appreciate your time that you've spent. I'm going to answer a couple questions because I really want to be fair to the other presenters. So here's some more questions. How do you adapt these rubrics for K through 6? Great question. Francine Gloob is asking this question. How do you adapt these rubrics? Good question. What I would do to adapt the rubrics, and I'll send you these, just shoot me an email and I'll send you these rubrics. I would adapt these rubrics for K through 6 by just simplifying the language. And I would start with students by saying, okay, kids, we are going to assess critical thinking. And I'd actually give them an example of a video that shows critical thinking. Or maybe you give them a small task that asks them to use critical thinking themselves. Then I would have them use their language. I'd have them put Post-its up around, hey, what is critical thinking? What does that look like? And you know what? They might say, hey, critical thinking is seeing things from other people's point of view. Great. Instead of saying seeing things from other perspectives, with a younger student, you could say seeing things from a different point of view. Okay? But really get the students involved with this. Tyler Carey asked, do you feel like including room for growth in your rubrics? Yes. Tyler, this is a great question. How do we allow students to go above and beyond? Okay? My answer to that, Tyler, is usually the target skills are actually the opportunity for students to go above and beyond. If you want, what you can do is you can put a target band for the 21st century skills, and you can include another section that says exceeding or extending, okay? And then what I would do is leave that blank, okay? Leave that actual section blank, and then work with students to give them the opportunity to talk about what might this look like to extend this particular standard of critical thinking or creativity of communication, okay? And work with the students together. But I would say it's very critical, Tyler, that when you start doing this, I wouldn't give the students the opportunity to extend their standard or their understanding of that 21st century skill. And that's particularly because of the fact that you haven't really given them enough opportunity to first meet that standard, okay? Sorry, so many questions, guys. I really appreciate these questions, and you're taking this time, so I'm gonna keep answering these questions. And if you wanna tune out and go to a different conference, this is all going to be available on YouTube, and I'll share that with you. The questions from Kevin: what best practices do you have to give different grades in a group? We have a problem where parents do not feel it's fair when students don't pull their weight. That is a great question, Kevin, okay? I'm gonna answer that question with two ways. First, when you do the collaboration with groups, it's very important that you're very explicit with what does good group work look like? How do you pull your weight in a group? Are you understanding and building off other students' ideas? Are you giving your own ideas? And once work is divided up, are you doing your fair share of the work? Okay, so that's first, really be explicit about what you expect of students. Second is, do not give group grades, okay? I might lose some followers for this, but I strongly believe in this. Do not give the whole group a grade, because if you give the whole group a grade, chances are some students are gonna feel really left out because they either A, did all the work, or B, they hardly did any work, okay? So the way that you do that is you grade students individually in the project as a group. How well did that student share and give ideas? How well did they pull their fair share? How well did they accomplish the project tasks, okay? How well did they communicate with their group? How well did they approach adversity? When someone had a different idea, how well did they work with that student to resolve that idea and move forward? Rubrics, and we're very explicit about what that looks like, and give individual grades on that rubric within what your expectations are for collaboration. I'm going to get to a couple more questions. Eric asked a really good question. He says, Eric Parks, you say, are these rubrics self-created? Is a couple different places. We adapted these from the Buck Institute of Education, which is a really good organization that provides really good 21st century school rubrics. And we also worked together with our understanding of MYP criteria. And then third, we actually looked at our particular situation and where we were located, and that's how we created these particular rubrics, okay? So they're not necessarily self-created, it's utilizing best practice. That's not to say that you can't work with students to help create the language of the rubrics that makes sense in your actual area, okay? All right, here's a couple more questions I'm gonna get to. Some people have mentioned that they don't have my email. Again, my email, and I'm going to give this to you again, and you can see it if you do the rerun of the session, but my email is kylewagner@transformschool.com. Okay, it's kylewagner@transformschool.com. KYLEWAGNER@transformschool.com. Okay, so there's a couple people who want that email. I'm going to give you that email one more time, okay, so that you guys can have that email available. I'm going to share this screen for just a second, and this is going to give you the email. All right, here is my email. I'm going to post it one more time, kylewagner@transformschool.com. Again, if you're still tuning in and you missed that, I'm going to keep this up here for a couple more minutes, kylewagner@transformschool.com. This is the email. If you want those 21st century skill rubrics, just send me an email and I'll be happy to send that rubric back to you. And also tell me a little bit about where you're from, what school that you work at, what your position is, and chances are I can help you to get the information that you're looking for. Again, that's Kyle Wagner at transformschool.com. The book is called Power of Simple. And here is my Twitter handle at KWagsSD3. So if you want to follow me, reach out. I'm really happy to share anything that I know, and I'm really happy to learn from everyone else as well, because everyone else has their own expertise as well. Okay, so here are those again. I'm going to stop that and go back and answer just a couple more questions. Okay, thank you. Some people are saying thank you for the presentation. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm going to try to look at a couple more questions. Amber says, how can we better understand the in-depth 21st century skills? I think I answered that. There are a couple places that you can go to. The book Most Likely to Succeed. The book that I shared with you called The Power of Simple, which you can find on Amazon, goes a little bit more into those 21st century skills. And there's a great resource if you want to look up P21. It's P21, and P21 lists all these 21st century skills. It's a research group that has worked together to formulate what are those 21st century skills. Tiffany, I see, shoot, Tiffany, I'm sorry because you went down. Tiffany's question is, my school is very strict about requiring student privacy. Any ideas how to let students create blogs while keeping their privacy? This is so important, and thank you, Tiffany, for reaching out. I'm sure that your school has a digital citizenship policy. So every school probably has a digital citizenship policy. What I would really do before you actually create those blogs is work together with your leadership team in really formulating that digital citizenship policy. What does that look like? What does technology use at your school look like? What is fair use? Well, how do we ensure student privacy? Okay, and what our school did is we created an internal system. So what your school can do is create an internal system for you to share out your learning, start out that way. And that way you can ensure that students' privacy is still maintained. We also only use the first names. We don't use last names of any of our students, and that's because we want to really we want to really respect their privacy and ensure that that's really valid. Okay, so again, work together with your administration, form a digital citizenship statement or technology statement, and ensure that all students know that. We would share every single morning. We have a circle time, and one of our whole week session is how do we ensure that we're leaving a good digital footprint. Okay, so once you have that policy, it's easy then to work with students to ensure that their privacy is maintained. Okay. Let's see, any more questions? If you want to ask any more questions, I think I've gotten through most of these questions. I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. I'm very inspired. Over 300 people attended this session, and that really makes my heart warm and makes me feel very happy that so many people are interested in really helping students get equipped with what we know are the skills that's going to help them in the future. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of thank yous, thank you, thank yous. I'm getting some more thank yous. Let's see, any other questions? If you have any other questions, I'm sticking around for about another 5 minutes. Hopefully I answered each of your questions. Oh, somebody asked me, how do you work with experts? So how do you work with people outside of school? So for our case, our particular project was on how do we improve the local waterways. And so really what we did is we reached out first to our parents, okay? This is a really good strategy that you can use. I tell you, inevitably, there is one of your parents who knows about every topic or every project that you are going to be doing with your students. So first, send an email out to all your parents and say, you know what, we're looking to do a project on improving our local waterway. Does anyone know any government officials? Does anyone have any expertise in environmental engineering? Does anyone have any expertise in terms of businesses, local businesses that are located next to these waterways? Does anyone know an NGO or a nonprofit that works in this issue? And I guarantee you that your parents, one of your parents will know somebody or actually work. That's one of their professions. And so I'd reach out first to your parents. The second thing is, like I mentioned before, is get a dedicated person at your school to act as that experiential learning coordinator, that person who coordinates the project's connection to the outside community. And what you will do is you'll create a spreadsheet that has all your teachers listed. It has that experiential learning coordinator able to set up the experts to come in and work with students, or actually set up those trips where the students in the class, in that class, can reach out and work with those experts outside in the real world. And that's how you can connect to experts outside of school. I think the questions might be shutting off your ability to ask questions, and I think I've answered most of your questions, and I've given you my email a couple of times. So I'm going to be signing out in about 2 minutes, and I'm just going through the questions here. I apologize, there's a little lag. So many people have asked questions, and I'm just scrolling through the questions here on my iPad. I see some people have tuned in from all over Buffalo, New York, Mexico. Some people tuning in from India, Pakistan, Baja California. Here's a question. So Chris Full was talking about Iowa teaching. So they have a stream: science, technology, religion, engineering, art, and math. And it looks like someone put in the resources to check out Vancouver's Big Ideas. This is a good resource too. There's the Big Idea Project, and that's in the United States. You could look that up, and that helps to really provide some resources around how do you teach around big ideas. So someone asked me a question: how do you come up with projects? How do you come up with project ideas? And some of that in a later session, but just to give you a brief snapshot, to come up with a really good project, really first the two questions you have to ask yourself is, what do people do in the real world? What are some of the biggest problems that we have to solve in our local community? And third, what are our kids really interested in? Okay, so what are our kids interested in? What problems do we have to solve in the real world? And third, you might look at, what do we have to teach? And where all those three things aligned, that's really the intersection of those is a good idea for a project, okay? All right, so I apologize, I'm a fast talker. Your first language, this might have been pretty fast for you, but I am gonna put this on YouTube, and this will be available live on YouTube, probably in about an hour or two. And I will also have the subtitles for you. So if English is not your first language, I'll have the subtitles so that you can read what I've been mentioning in this broadcast, and that you will be able to start assessing 21st century skills yourself. Okay? All right, so I'm gonna sign off now. It says links. There's a link for this particular video. Once I stop the broadcast, it's gonna be available to anyone. Feel free to share this video with anyone that you know that might really benefit from this. And please shoot me an email, okay? Hopefully you know I'm extremely passionate about this. Really, my life's mission is to be in service to this kind of learning because it's so impactful. So I'd be happy to share my email and share some of these rubrics with you and some additional ideas that you could do for projects to your school. And also, I'd be happy to come to your school as well. I'm working with a few schools in the area and improving their project-based practices with your school to improve these opportunities for students, and work specifically with your teachers at your school on really improving their instructional practice. Okay, be happy to do that. So I'm going to sign off. Everyone attend the other sessions. Thank you very much for attending my session, and shoot me an email. I will talk to you soon, and enjoy the rest of the Education on Air conference. And bye-bye.